So Medtronic, I think like it's as I was researching the company, I was astonished by like the range of products that you manufacture. Maybe that's a good place to start and just talk about the various devices you make and the various ailments that they treat.
Sure. Yeah. I'm a cardiologist. That's my background. So I knew one corner of what Medtronic did when I joined the company. But yeah, the cardiology devices, we started as a business, with the first pacemaker being developed. It was developed in a collaboration between a surgeon and an engineer. There had been a snowstorm in Minneapolis, electricity to a hospital, and patients who were depending on plug-in pacemakers, didn't survive because of that. And so the development was of an implantable pacemaker. So that's where things got started, and now we have a
roughly
range.
How long ago was that? Like,
let's see, it's about 60 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah, and since then it's really dramatically expanded in terms of what we cover. So diabetes with closed loop systems, a full range of cardiology type products. Whether it's for heart valves that can be implanted either surgically or through catheters. We have robots that we're working on for surgical procedures, both for the spine as well as soft tissue surgeries throughout the body. Neurovascular procedures for stroke as well. We have multiple devices in that space, and I'm sure I'm leaving out many other things. Parkinson's disease with deep brain stimulation. So it's a wide range of types of products. Some of them are predominantly mechanical. Some of them really interact with data from patients and have more closed loop systems that feed back to treatments. And others are, sort of diagnostic or assisting during procedures like robotics.
So we titled this talk, patient-centric innovation. How does the patient centricity play into your innovation process and your product development lifecycle?
Yeah, it's really important, obviously, and we think both about the interactions with the physician and the patient. And historically, the medical research and even medical device research has been very focused on the interactions with the physician or the surgeon, and I think it's pretty new, and we're working diligently to make sure we come up to speed quickly because. Traditionally, I think we've thought about how do we ensure the best outcomes for patients sort of in a scientific way. But more and more, we recognize that the success of our products depends on whether patients experience the value of that. So getting patient input early on how we deliver that value, as well as the diversity of different experiences that people may have with our products based on what community they live in, it could vary. So an example of that, that our designers have worked on. So over time, we've been able to transform from that initial pacemaker, which was both large and also not very interactive in terms of the programming, to one where patients, physicians, their caregivers can see the data from their devices and even have some remote features enabled, and for sure a lot of remote monitoring capabilities that's been in place for some time. Now with Bluetooth, that information can be seen on a smartphone, but what we recognized is that not everybody who receives a pacemaker has or uses a smartphone. And so some of the experience research that we had to do was to find alternate devices, how patients should interact with them, and then make sure we had a representative sample of patients to be able to represent the diverse experiences. Whether we know rural settings, for example, are an area where there's less access to high technology. It might vary by age group. It can vary by socioeconomic status. So those are some of the ways we look upfront when we introduce new platforms.
Did you have to build like new patient feedback loops to like collect this information from patients in order to develop these products?
Yeah, we're always doing that. I'd say that's an ongoing process. With whether it's in clinical trials, more and more we are using mechanisms to collect data that's from the patient on their experience relating to their physiologic data that we actually have been recording for quite a long time for the treatment of patients. And so putting those two sets of information together in order to optimize the experience. We want to be very mindful. All of us use systems on our phones, apps on our phones that are using a lot of our information all the time. But really what we want to know when we use an app like Waze or whatever is just how to get there the fastest, or we don't really care about all of the information except for that critical, direction of what's the optimal route. It's the same for our patients. We don't want to flood them with information. Same with our physicians. We want to make information actionable for them.
You talked a little bit about patients in rural areas maybe not having the same access. There's probably all sorts of distributions there. What is Medtronic doing to make sure these state-of-the-art devices are available to the most people possible?
Yeah, it's a very broad question that you're asking. Some of it starts with when we assess the needs that early on in product development, that we have a broad mindset that we're representing diverse needs across multiple communities, globally as well. And so it really starts with that in the design phases of our products and assessing the market opportunity, as well as what kinds of design features might be important. It goes on to our clinical trials. When we think about enrollment, we want to make sure that we have data that's really representative of who's going to be treated. An example of that is our current renal denervation program, which is a treatment to alleviate hypertension, high blood pressure, using a device. High blood pressure is something that probably many people in this room have, and it's difficult. It's a silent killer. Increases the risk of stroke and death and heart attack and kidney failure. At the same time, it's not something that people feel most days. It's asymptomatic, so it's something that's easy for people to forget to take their medications, and so there are big problems with compliance with medications or taking them consistently. And we also know that certain communities are underserved and have even higher repercussions from these effects, and these tend to be our Black Americans and other communities in the U.S. So in our trials, it was important that we had sites that represented those patients, and that we had investigators who represented these patients, that we worked with the community to, if anything, overrepresent patients, because we need to have that kind of information to make sure that our products are delivering. And then going into the community, once we develop a therapy, it's important for us to work with sites and physicians. It's more challenging in some ways for the medical device landscape than it might be for pharmaceutical, in that many times we're rolling out a new procedure where we want to work at highly specialized centers first, so that we have both high volumes of procedures, high experience of the operators there. Unfortunately, there are disparities in care, across the United States that relate volume and specialization that don't give access to equal access to everyone. And so, to overcome that, we have to make sure that we reach out and train sites who are more representative.
How does that the blood pressure device work? Asking not just because I didn't take my medication today, but mechanically to lower a person's blood pressure. I know you're a cardiologist, but how does that work?
Yeah, it works well. The way that it works is that your body has feedback loops, multiple feedback loops that can increase or lower blood pressure. One of those is your sympathetic system, sort of that fight or flight response, and that can be, when it's activated, it can increase blood pressure. The kidneys and the arteries of the kidneys have nerves that surround them that can increase sympathetic activation. So this procedure treats those nerves to reduce the signals to the brain. And you
embed a device
there? It's not an implant. It's actually a treatment. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I won't be using that today then.
Not yet.
I'll just take my pill when I get home. So in terms of the data that's collected, you talk about the devices, the treatments, and really putting the patients in charge and connecting them with their data. Can you give some examples of how you've closed that loop and looped in patients into that data stream of medical information?
Mm-hmm. Well, diabetes is a good example where for some time we've had closed loop systems, and um, it, w- similar to what I described with the cardiac monitors that monitor heart rhythms, uh, people who have diabetes have to check their blood sugar frequently throughout the day, modify what they eat, modify their insulin dosing in order to maintain, a safe level of their blood sugar, not too high, not too low. And that's very stressful, obviously, to have to be thinking about that all the time. And so the closed systems that we're continuing to evolve and have been on the market already, but always continuing to improve, they sense the blood sugar. They share that information with the patient, but they also have a closed loop feature that allows the adjustment of insulin to maintain blood sugar levels. So the patient's involved. That information is also shared with the physician. Many of these are children as well, so this can be also shared with their families or their caregivers. And so you have this ecosystem of people and data around the patient. And more, we're looking to include data on activity, on what's being eaten, and to be able to incorporate that into smarter algorithms. Um, the current version that was recently approved in the US, the 780G version, also allows the device to sense when a bolus of insulin is needed and to deliver that bolus. So more and more, this is to take away the hundreds of decisions that a person with diabetes needs to make throughout the day, so that they can trust that something else is working to maintain their blood sugar throughout all their activities.
One of the trends that I've been surprised by is like the number of people that are wearing continuous glucose monitors as a lifestyle choice. They may not have diabetes, but they want to see how their glucose levels fluctuate throughout the day, how eating different foods affect them. Do you think that's a trend we're going to see more of?
Yeah, I think we are seeing it already. Ours are certainly medical grade, and that's where we're primarily focused. But certainly there's a tremendous interest in knowing that, and many of us have worn these throughout the day just for out of curiosity to see how things vary. But for sure, there's a clear trend that people want more information on their health. They want to know what actions to take from it, and more of these types of interventions are being requested by people and with an interest in their own health, rather than being told by physicians what to do.
We talked a little bit about the rise of both telehealth and in-home diagnostics today. Um, as a manufacturer of devices that people will be using at home in a lot of cases, are there any regulatory hurdles that you're encountering when building these devices and knowing they're going to be used in a home environment, not necessarily in a clinical environment?
For sure, we need to address exactly how patients use things, make sure that things are well understood. I don't know if I'd call them hurdles. I mean, I think when we work with regulatory agencies, we're sharing the goal that things are used optimally, and that the benefits that we think patients should receive are being received. So I don't know that I would say that they're necessarily hurdles, but we do incorporate, assessing how patients interact with our products, both in the pre-market setting as well as in the post-market setting. It's really important that we continue to intake signals from whether it's from the physiologic data that we collect or if it's from our patient experiences with our products.
Is there anything, and obviously you don't need to make any product announcements today, but are there any technologies or innovations coming down the pike that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few. I mean, I mentioned treatment for hypertension that's not yet approved. More and more, we have and are continuing to iterate on robotics to be used in surgery, whether all different types of surgeries. And those are using both sensors as well as artificial intelligence and imaging processing to help surgeons detect how to do a procedure, and also benefit from so much data that already exists on millions of procedures that have been performed before. So by integrating this, we think that one can democratize surgery a bit more. Right now, you're so reliant on the individual experience of an individual surgeon and their skill set. So it's, as a family member, when I refer my family to a surgeon for a procedure, I'm networking to find out who's the best person.
Mhm.
I mean, it would be wonderful to get to a place where that was less necessary, at least starting with the common procedures and getting more and more so into the more difficult procedures, because there's a saying in medicine, see one, do one, teach one. Well, that's not a great a great
It
method when you think about how
doesn't
much data
scale.
there are.
It doesn't scale, right?
Yeah.
Like I mean, and that's the thing about surgeons, and they know this, is that their skill set doesn't scale. Like it's really about how many procedures they have done. And there's the hope that with robotics and AI, you might be able to scale those skills and apply them in a more generalized way, much to surgeons' dismay. But I mean, it really could be great for patient outcomes.
Yeah, and some of these things are being done already. So an example is detecting colon cancer. So that's a procedure, many of us know is a procedure that's done with a colonoscopy. It's done by gastroenterologists. They do multiple procedures a day. They're looking intensively at images. The precancerous lesions can be really hard to see. Some of them can be flat. It's just difficult. And you can imagine you don't want to be the last patient of the day, because people get tired, and as physicians get tired, they're doing long procedures. So we do have an artificial intelligence product called GI Genius that marks a box based on AI algorithms from imaging data and increases the rate of detection of precancerous lesions for the gastroenterologist doing these procedures.
It does it in real time as the procedure is being done.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that then it can be biopsied if necessary. And obviously, you asked about regulatory controls. I mean, it's obviously we want to make sure that there's the right level of accuracy. We don't want to have too many false positives or false negatives, et cetera. So, all those things are in place. But in the end, it increases the detection rate, and that can have an impact in reducing the risk of colon cancer.